Lovely students, welcome back to another exciting literature class. Today's class will be analyzing a lovely poem. As you can see in the picture, it looks like Christmas time, when the three wise men were going to the east to see the baby Jesus. So, we will be doing an exciting poem titled The Journey of the Magi by T.S. Eliot. The Journey of the Magi by T.S. Eliot. Now, in this poem, we will be learning the background of the poet and the poem. We're going to also be learning the subject matter or the summary of the poem. We're also going to be looking at the poetic devices employed in the poem, as well as the use of imagery and symbolism in the poem. Now, let's look at the poet. We're going to be looking at the poet T.S. Eliot. The background of the poet. Thomas Stearns Eliot was born on 26 September 1881 in St. Louis, Missouri, in the United States of America. He had his elementary education in St. Louis. In 1906, he got admission into Harvard University, had a BA degree in 1909 and MA in 1910. He wrote for and edited the journal The Advocate. Eliot won the Nobel Peace Prize for Literature in 1948 and died in January 1965 in London. That's the background of the poet of this lovely poem titled The Journey of the Magi. Now, the background and setting of the poem. The poem was inspired by Eliot's spiritual life in the church, as well as other significant events in his life. T.S. Eliot took the poem's opening lines from a sermon delivered by one Bishop Lancelot Andrews in 1622, more than 300 years before the time he wrote the poem. The setting of the poem is the valley that contains Bethlehem and Jerusalem, both of which are hugely important cities to the Christian faith. The valley, on their way to Jerusalem to look for the baby Jesus, where they were as at the time this poem was written. So he's talking about their journey, the journey itself. Now, we are going to be looking at the subject matter of the poem. The journey of the Magi is based on biblical narrative of the wise men from the east that presented gold, frankincense, and myrrh as gifts to the infant Jesus Christ when he was born. The poem is a reference to problems and tribulations man encountered in the journey of life. Now, we're going to be reading the poem. A cold coming we had of it, just the worst time of the year. But a journey, and such a journey, the ways deep and the weather sharp, the very dead of winter, and the camels galled, sore-footed, refractory, lying down in the melting snow. There were times we regretted the summer palaces on slopes, the terraces, and the silken girls bringing sherbet. Then the camel men cursing and grumbling and running away and wanting their liquor and woman, and the night fires going out and the lack of shelters, and the cities hostile and the towns unfriendly, and the villages dirty and charging high prices. A hard time we had of it. At the end, we preferred to travel all night, sleeping in snatches, with the voices singing in our ears, saying that this was all folly. Now, we're going to be analyzing this first stanza. This first stanza is talking about the journey itself, everything they encountered during the journey, the lack of a wonderful place to sleep, the lack of warmth because it was the winter. The journey of the Magi is the period when the three wise men were traveling to Jerusalem to look for the baby Jesus. So obviously we know that it is winter period. It's cold and they don't have anything to keep themselves warm. And then the camel riders are running away because they want to go and drink their beer and enjoy time with their women. So because of that, we see that the three wise men are suffering. They are really, really suffering because everything is just not going their way. Cities are hostile, some towns are unfriendly, don't want to accommodate them. We are seeing dirty villages and people are charging high price. You see that the journey began during the winter season and the cities are so unfriendly, and even as they're sleeping, they have to start their journey at night. And while sleeping alone at night, there is this fear of wild animals. This is the analysis of the first stanza. It is just explaining the sufferings that they encountered, as well as their uncertainties of this journey, where we see with our voices singing in our ears, saying that this was all folly. So they are thinking whether this journey should have even been taken at all. Let's look at the second stanza. We're looking at the second stanza. Then at dawn, we came down to a temperate valley, wet below the snow line, smelling of vegetation, with a running stream and a water mill beating the darkness, and trees on the low sky. And an old white horse galloped away in the meadow. Then we came to a tavern with vine leaves over the intel, 6 hands at an open door dicing for pieces of silver, and feet kicking the empty wine skins. But there was no information, and so we continued and arrived at evening, not a moment too soon, finding the place. It was, you may say, satisfactory. We will be looking at the analysis of this stanza. After traveling all night, the Magi came to a more friendly environment, and it was already dawn. So they saw the welcoming smell of vegetation in the temperate valley, running stream and water, and even a tavern to have a little bit of drink. However, they were yet to find the place of the baby Jesus, as you can see, but there was no information, and so we continued. They did not find the baby Jesus here. They were just describing how good it felt to have seen at least a friendly environment that was able to welcome them, so they'll be able to at least drink something and prepare for their journey ahead. So that's the analysis of the second stanza. The analysis of the second stanza. Now, we will be looking at the third and the final stanza. All these was a long time ago, I remember, and I would do it again, but set down. This, where we led all the way for the birth or death. There was a birth, certainly. We had evidence and no doubt. I had seen birth and death, but had thought they were different. This birth was hard and bitter agony for us, like death, our death. We returned to our places, these kingdoms, but no longer at ease here in the old dispensation, with an alien people clutching their gods. I should be glad of another death. Now, this narrative now brings us back to the present moment. We see that the Magi have seen Jesus, they have presented their gifts, and they have gone. They feel reborn because they've experienced Christ, and they're feeling like going back to their place is they went back to their place quite alright, but they're feeling off, they're feeling different, because in their place they're worshiping so many gods, but these people have encountered Christ, and they're feeling like, I think it's time for me to die. They want to die and experience eternity that Christ is bringing, because they feel that their old place is so different for them. It's not what they want anymore. Since they've been touched by Christ, they feel so out of place. That's what they feel as they've returned home. So the poem, titled Journey of the Magi by S.S.S. Eliot, is showing us the journey of the 3 wise men into Jerusalem, searching for the baby Jesus. And even after meeting the baby Jesus and presenting their gifts, they return to their place, but they have experienced Christ. They have experienced salvation, and they feel that going back to their place means going back to the old ways, and the old ways of worshiping other gods, and they are not comfortable with it. So they would rather die and experience utmost salvation. That is the poem Journey of the Magi by T.S. Eliot. Now, we'll be looking at our lovely poetic devices. We're looking at the poetic devices in the poem Journey of the Magi. The first poetic device here we'll be looking at will be the language as usual. The use of winter as cold and snow is a combination of visual and tactile senses for the reader to feel the difficulties faced by the Magi. The poet also uses derogatory words as expressions. We see just the worst time of the year, line 2, to explain winter. Deep and sharp weather. Winter is always sharp and so cold, in line 4. The death of winter, in line 5. The past tense of verbs like regretted, had preferred, came galloped shows that the journey took place in the past. Yes, the journey of the Magi took place before almost all of us were born. Before, in fact, during the time the baby Jesus was born. So it was in between BC and BC, in between BC and the life of Jesus Christ. Yes, so that's the language used by the poet in the poem Journey of the Magi. Let's look at another poetic device. We're going to be looking at the mood of the writer when he was writing this poem. The poet's persona is in a sober mood at the beginning, and the tone is that of regret. But the narrator was glad because the Magi saw a temperate valley with a natural vegetation. Let us look at the figures of speech. The figures of speech in the Journey of the Magi by T.S. Eliot. The first figure of speech on our list is biblical allusion. Biblical allusion. We know that the poem is a biblical allusion of the wise men that visited Jesus Christ in Matthew chapter 2 verses 1 to 12. Another example of biblical allusion is 3 trees on a low sky, which signifies or points to the 3 crosses on which Jesus and the 2 robbers were crucified. Luke chapter 23 verses 32 to 40. The 3 crosses, Jesus in the middle and the 2 thieves by his side. We also see the reference to 6 hands dancing for pieces of silver. It recalls the death of Jesus Christ in John chapter 19 verses 23 to 24 and how the Roman soldiers gambled for Christ's robe. So it's the reference of 6 hands dancing for pieces of silver is referencing the death of Christ during the time where the Roman soldiers were casting lots for who would take Jesus's clothes. So that is biblical allusion. Another figure of speech in the poem is antithesis. Antithesis. The poem displayed the contrast between the difficulties of the night and the pleasurable atmosphere of the day. The difficulties of the night, the harsh weather, no place to sleep, fear of wild animals, and then the pleasurable atmosphere of the day, beautiful sun, warm weather, and nature. The first part deals with the problems the Magi encounter in the night, sleeping in snatches, camel gold. The second part now shows the temperate valley with natural vegetation and conducive environment that reduce their burden. So that is the figure of speech antithesis in the poem The Journey of the Magi. Another figure of speech is transferred epithet. Transferred epithet is a figure of speech where a modifier, where an adjective qualifies a noun other than the person or thing it actually described. So we see that the personified cities, towns, and villages in lines 15 to 16 are good examples. And the cities hostile and the town unfriendly, and the villages dirty and charging high price. So you see that here the adjective has qualified the noun other than the thing it is actually describing. So that is transferred epithet. And then we have other figures of speech. It means that we have other figures of speech like alliteration. Alliteration, cold coming, way deep, weather sharp, WW, cold coming, And then we have camel men cursing. And then another figure of speech is dramatic monologue. The poet persona narrated the psychological distress of the Magi, with the voices singing in our ears. It symbolizes the inner spirit of the Magi, which continue to warn them about the dangerous nature of the journey. And then we will be looking at the use of symbolism in the poem. The Magi saw a running stream. A running stream means life, because a running stream is flowing, meaning life. Life never ends until it's supposed to end. They saw the water mill beating the darkness, which depicts doubts and frustrations that are driven away. And then the cold winter in the night, which symbolizes frustration. And the temperate valley, where the Magi discovered a tavern in the dawn, depicts happiness. And we are moving down to our evaluation. Now, in our evaluation, you'll be commenting on the poet's use of repetition in the poem. Comment on the poet's use of repetition in the poem. So we've come to the end of our lovely class titled The Journey of the Magi by S.S.S. Eliot. So I'll be seeing you in our next class, where we'll be analyzing the themes in this poem. Until then, it's bye for now.